Yeah, good morning, everybody from around the world. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank iLead Africa for this opportunity to just share with us on digitizing Africa from an African perspective, basically. So, I'm going to just start from the current situation in the world, COVID-19. I mean, just came up, took everybody unawares, and amplified the need for the digital. Because when it happened, I mean, there was lockdown everywhere. Practically most countries in the world actually locked down, and there was no movement anywhere. So the only enabler for communication, relationships, connections, transactions was digital. And so what that did for Africa basically was it exposed, our vulnerability. It showed our humanity, and of course, it showed the fact that there's still a huge digital divide in Africa. I mean, the last week I talked about the urban-rural broadband access and all that. There's so much in Africa, there's digital divide between the urban and rural areas. And that's something that needs to basically be addressed. So we can actually have equality rather than having equality that we have today in Africa, the urban and rural environment. So for me, that's very critical in starting up this conversation this morning, because what happened with the pandemic actually gave rise to the fact that there's a lot that needs to be done in Africa as aware. Just to proceed, digitalization and development, these are the key words basically we're looking at this morning. For digitization, I mean, we're converting paper to digital data. That's what it's all about, really. So, where is Africa positioned today in terms of, a digital maturity level and all that across the states? That's something that basically we need to look at and be able to say, look, this is where we are and this is where we're going. And I'm going to just share some facts on that as we go on. Then, of course, the issue of using digital data to amplify how we work, or our work, speaks about process when it comes to digitalization. Then, of course, development has to do with improvements in a country's economic and social conditions. It might be an individual, it might be a state, it might be a country. So, look at all of this. At the end of the day, how do we transition technology, digital in this case, to be able to improve the lot of Africans? And that's something that it's very instructive. Now, looking at Africa itself, I mean, Khalid talked about Africa, initially, but I'm going to just give a view of where Africa is today. Africa is a diverse continent with different cultures, disparate economies and all of that. It has different kind of patterns. And digital readiness and digital literacy in Africa also differs from country to country. So it also impacts on how the economies in those countries actually, in those states in Africa actually are developed. There are statistics actually to show all of those levels. We are the youngest continent in the world because 60% of the population in Africa is actually under 25 right now, 60%. So we have a huge, thriving young population, which is actually an asset to Africa. It's an asset that we need to actually propel and take advantage of. Basically, is a huge asset for Africa. We need to look at that. Africa is about 2.2 billion people in population. So that figure, 60%, is a huge number. When I imagine market, I mean, we are actually the bride of the world right now. Like I mentioned earlier, Africa is a digitally divided continent, the urban and rural divide that we have today. In terms of mobile financial services, which again, as we mentioned before, with M-Pesa and all of that, there's increasing growth in the use of financial services in Africa today. We have 122 million active users of mobile financial services in Africa today, which is actually a good figure, but it's still way below. If you look at percentage between our 2.2 billion population and that figure of 122 million, it's still very low, comparatively. Then we have about 747 million SIM connections in Africa. Again, just suppose that with our population, it's still very low, basically. Looking at the Africa itself, what are the natural attributes we have in Africa today? I'm talking about the young population that we have. 99.6% of global oil output is from Africa. I mean, Khalid also mentioned the fact that 8 countries in Africa actually are major oil producers. 90% of the world's platinum supply is in Africa. Half of the world's gold supply is in Africa. 2/3 of the world's manganese is in Africa. 95% of the world's uranium is in Africa. 7% of the world's coltan is in Africa. Now, the question is this: has it been of value to Africa? The answer is no. I mean, Khalid also alluded to that as well. Natural resources, they take it from Africa, they refine them, bring back to us, and we pay exorbitant rates for using those refined products. So He also mentioned about the fact that some of these things in making a mobile phone, 17 primary inputs come from Africa. So there's need to transition from the tangible in Africa and begin to look at intangible, which is information and knowledge. How can we be able to take knowledge and information, actually make it, create value out of it, and be able to make position Africa to be actually a hub, for the world, going forward. Now, the way Africa is positioned today, geographically speaking, is strategic. We need to actually, change the global value chain, supply chain today, in the way it is positioned in Africa, in the world today. Africa's geographically speaking is starting to be able to, change all of those, that narrative of the global supply chain. Because, for example, this meeting is happening right now. We're in the same time zone with Europe. Africa has practically the same time zone with Europe. I mean, anybody anywhere in the world can conveniently at this time connect to this webinar, at the different time zones and be able to, have decision with us because of the way Africa is positioned, basically. So we're at advantage. So things are going to change from China to Nigeria, India to Nigeria, India to Africa, China to Africa, because of the way Africa is positioned. And Africa needs to take advantage of this positioning. We're talking about the African free trade. We talked about the SATAM, single air travel market and all that. But until that becomes implemented, we're going to lose out from the opportunities that are actually, facing Africa today in terms of where we are geographically and the young population and what technology can do for us, digital technology can do for us as Africa, basically. So for me, that's something that is critical. AU has their digital transformation strategy for 2020-2030. So that has to be pushed. And we need commitment of our leaders in Africa. Leadership is key to all of this. It's not just private sector, but it's a stakeholder inclusive thing. The government, the private sector, the NGOs needs to be critically involved in all of this. Of course, our development partners, the World Bank, the IMF, the European partners need to be involved in all of this actually to ensure that we take advantage of the digital strategy that AU actually put forward and implement it, make it work. Again, I want to come back to the issue of digital divide between the urban broadband access and the rural broadband access. It's a major issue that we need to deal with. Again, most countries in Africa also have the Universal Service Provision Fund. Those funds should be used to actually ensure that the rural areas actually have broadband connectivity. And wireless is the fastest way to do it. Not wireless, of course, we do fiber and do wireless, but wireless is actually the fastest way to connect Africa. I mean, in terms of GDP, you talked about the fact that 10% growth in wireless or fixed connectivity gives about 0.9% increase in GDP. So it's a value that we need to look at how we can ensure that it begins to happen in Africa as it were. And there are a lot of advantages to do this, a lot of ways to actually basically do this, in Africa. So if you look at things like where we are as Africa, those technologies that are available today, quite a few of them. I mean, are you going to talk about Internet of Things? Are you going to talk about advanced robotics, big data analytics, cloud technology? Cloud actually makes it a lot cheaper for Africa. It gives us a leapfrogging dimension in Africa. So actually hop on the cloud environment without necessarily having to have infrastructure, cost and all that ab initio. So cloud services, for me, Africa needs to go the way of cloud services, corporates and all that. It reduces the cost of doing business as well. So there are opportunities in Africa, basically. So we need to look at all of those opportunities. The success of this digital journey for Africa depends on the macroeconomic environment in Africa. The first speaker talked about all of this. Basically, the condition that exists in each of the countries' economy. It's important that the macroeconomic environment will support digital growth in Africa. So, I mean, things like inflation, unemployment rates, consumer spending, which I mentioned earlier on, the fiscal and monetary policy in those countries must support digital transformation. So, all around Africa today, a few countries in Africa actually have that. I mean, I can mention Rwanda, for example. I mean, they're pushing digital. Kenya is another country I can also mention. Nigeria is another one. They're pushing digital. There are 300 million digital transactions per month. 300 million. Talks about financial digital money, digital currency per month across the suite of their services. Paystack, which is a Nigerian company, was just sold for $200 million a couple of months back. I mean, it's a payments service company. In Pesa, between 2017 and Q1 2020, they had 12.2 billion transactions in the financial within that period. In Tanzania, of course, They have 6 mobile services. In Q1 of 2020, they had 256 million transactions. It looks so huge. When you compare this with the population in those countries, there's still a lot that needs to be done. I mean, we need to push for it. Nigeria has Remita. Remita in 2019 had 48.5 million transactions. So why am I saying this? There's growth in terms of mobile inclusion, but a lot needs to be done to actually include the unbanked people in Africa into the mobile, into the financial environment. And digital is the way actually that is what is going to help Africa to get into that space and ensure that every person who's unbanked is financially included in the financial economy. That's something that needs to be done. In the way education, I mean, COVID-19 actually ensured that those who had the capability were able to migrate online learning and all of that. But quite a lot did not because of lack of infrastructure. Power is a major issue. I mean, Khalid talked about the fact that 100 million Africans do not have electricity. Power still remains a major issue. And until that is dealt with in Africa, the growth of digital adoption is going to be still very slow, very, very slow. Okay, so learning, education is key. Again, our curriculum for education needs to change. I mean, STEM needs to be pushed all over Africa, basically, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It needs to be pushed all over Africa. So we need to change our curriculum. Ghana did the same during COVID-19 for testing of samples and all of that. They used drones as well. So again, for health, telemedicine is happening in Africa. But again, because of lack of access, it's limited in those who can have access to it in Africa. Retail market, for me, that's huge. Practically everybody in Africa is becoming an entrepreneur one way or the other because on social media platform, whether it's Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, and all of that, people have begun to actually market their products. To become individual entrepreneurs. But of course, there's a platform economy. That's what we are to the platform economy. Companies like Jumia, for example, okay? I mean, they provide a platform for people to, global electronic marketplace, for people actually to, display their products and create revenue. Okay? Again, it's part of wealth creation as well. So those platforms are what we need to begin to have happen all across Africa. Amazon today is a platform. Amazon is a platform, and I mean, it's the richest man in the world today because of the platform it has. Okay, so we need to begin to create those digital platforms, commerce platforms in Africa that will enable entrepreneurs in Africa to have a place to be able to transact business and have customers engage as well. So for me, there's leadership requirements. The governments in Africa needs to commit to digital. The other stakeholders like private sector partners need to commit to digital. The development partners we have also need to commit to digital as well. So supporting Africa becomes a holistic approach that everybody is involved in ensuring that Africa moves from where it is today, 39% internet penetration to about 100% in a couple of years. 2030 is almost around the corner, and I hope that Africa will be able actually to get to that level where that penetration actually happens in Africa going forward. So on that note, I just want to stop down and thank you very much.
We're talking a lot about growth and industrialization, but how do we, as we foment that, as we encourage that, how do we also keep time for the diversity of rich cultures? How do we make sure that those are kept alive and the soul of that culture is kept alive throughout these initiatives? And kind of on that end, another thing that I think can impact as well is how do we ensure that this recovery and this growth is also sustainable, and that in this time, this very kind of unique time, we don't forgo sustainability, we don't forgo the uniqueness and diversity of culture for just very, very rapid economic focus. And I'm kind of opening that to whoever of the speakers would like to take that first.
Okay, great. So with regards to the issue of culture, I mean, culture needs to be consistent and it needs to be retained. However, when you look at the different countries in Africa with their very interesting and wonderful cultures, there's no way we're going to do with all of that. That's what makes people who they are. So you can't take that away from the people. Once you take the culture away from the people becomes different. They change from who they are. So cultures need to remain. They have to remain the way they are. You cannot actually make it better. Using technology actually to make it better. Now, one key thing that we need to look at education in Africa is the issue of language. is either French or English. We need to begin to use local language to teach in our schools in Africa. It's a lot easier to understand with local language than English the language that you're not born with. Local language actually is critical for rapid learning and understanding. So we need to begin to look at how we can explore the use of local languages. It's been done in some places in Africa, but it needs to be done across Africa. It's actually going to make Africa to leapfrog faster in terms of when it comes to technology and all of that, when it comes to STEM. It's going to make Africa, so communication in local language is very, very critical, very essential. Even during the pandemic period, most communities in Africa actually use the local language to actually communicate, the effect and impact of COVID-19. And it makes a lot of impact because it was easier to understand by the people rather than English or French, which is not homegrown and all that. That's number one. Number two, with the issue of sustainability, I mean, we have a young African population, which is like I said, is actually an advantage to Africa. However, one of the key things that needs to happen is actually from the government level, regulatory level. There has to be consistent policies, particularly in competition policy that enables everyone a level playing ground, a level playing field, so that they can all compete, on the same field. Then, of course, ease of doing business. The government policy actually need to encourage entrepreneurs. We're talking about here informal sector. How do you ensure that the informal sector continue to grow if there are not good policies that ensures that ease of the way they do business actually it's a lot easy with government policy and regulation. So for me, that's critical. That's one way we can actually sustain all of this growth, economic recovery and growth. If the right policies are not there, then we're just going to take a walk at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to have one last question that we had from an audience before we have a musical interlude. I know everyone's been very patient and we've had really rich discussions so far. So the last question that we have from a participant before the program even started, which I think is a great one, is how can we use ICTs to accelerate the impact on rural communities so they have access to similar opportunities than urban areas? And I know that was something that was addressed in the presentations very shortly, but if that could be addressed as well.
Earlier, when I talked about the issue of urban-rural digital divide in Africa, I mean, that's what that question is actually alluding to. Now, one of the ways that can be solved actually is, in some countries, I mean, is an ITU provision, USPF, Universal Service Provision Fund. They have that funding in most countries in Africa. They need to actually the essence of that fund is actually creating infrastructure in the rural areas. That's the essence of that fund, basically. So the governments in Africa needs to begin to use that fund for that purpose. That's one aspect that needs to be done. Number two, they need to also begin to, establish tech hubs in rural areas. You don't find any tech hub anywhere in the urban center, anywhere in the rural area in Africa. It's actually in urban centers. So they need to begin to establish tech hubs in the rural area. That will encourage and motivate, the young population actually to get involved in technology and be able to help to deliver services as well in those communities. That's something also that's important as well. The telcos, again, they look at investment in infrastructure for rural areas as not profits driven. However, they do CSR. They need to actually begin to look at it from that CSR perspective. They can invest in the rural area and use that CSR and get tax rebates from government. That's something they can also do for the telcos, going forward. Then availability of mobile devices. We need to ensure that at least we can get a mobile device in Africa for less than $50. We need to push towards that, getting a mobile device for less than $50. I mean, that should be more affordable to a lot of people in Africa. Then data costs. Data cost also is a critical issue. Data cost in Africa actually is one of the most expensive in the world. The country in Africa today that has the cheapest data cost is Somalia. It's about 0.55 USD for 1 gig. That's Somalia. But we need to begin to look at how we can reduce data cost in Africa because it's actually very, very high. So that's one of the, it has to do with consumer spending. Those in rural area don't have the funds to buy data at those rates we have today. So that becomes a limitation for them to have access to the digital environment, even when the infrastructure is actually in those areas. Thank you.